It's a dreary and foggy day, a little bit of a mist in the air here in Hitchens, Kentucky, which is not too far from where I live. A few years ago, YouTube creators started something that they did on their channels called an origin story. And what an origin story basically is you go back kind of to where you came from, show the places that you used to go to, and just kind of tell how you became to be. Well, we're going to do that today, but we're going to do it Whittdocs style. Of course, I'm here in what most would consider to be a dreary day, but it is a beautiful day for a cemetery visit. So I'm going to be doing my origin story here in a cemetery called Bowling Cemetery to visit the grave of Dewey Salmons. Dewey Salmons was my great-grandfather, and the grandfather that I speak of so much and was so close to, it's actually his father. So we are here in Bowling Cemetery. This started out as, now my grandfather told me the story about this place, and he said that, I may be mistaken, but I believe it was one of his sisters actually married a man, the last name Bowling. And this Bowling man owned the property that we are on, and this little hill here, he donated to be a cemetery. And you know, we find a lot, especially in Appalachia in Kentucky, we find a lot of cemeteries up on a hillside. The only thing I can figure, and this is the story that I've been told, is back in those days, a lot of farmland. Farmland was valuable. And I guess the thinking was, why waste the farmland, something that could make you money, on something like a cemetery? So Bowling Cemetery is where we are, and we're going to visit the grave and kind of take a look at one of my origins, just one of them, Mr. Dewey Salmons. So like I said, we are in a little town called, well, it's not even really a town, it's a spot on the map called Hitchens, Kentucky. Back in the day, there used to be a brickyard just down the road, and it employed a lot of the men in the area. A lot of people made livings here, and you know, from what I've been told, there was also a movie theater, which I can't even imagine now. There's a little gas station here, and that's pretty well about it. I'm going to show you some of the cemetery. It's a beautiful area, a beautiful view, one of the best views around. The fog is probably going to hinder that, but back in this field behind me, and I don't even know who lives there now, don't know who owns it, but back in this field behind me, and you can see, and I'll try to get a better shot here in just a second, but there's a silo there, and my grandfather used to tell me that's where that silo is, there was a house, and then that house he was born. So this is indeed an origin story for me. My grandfather was born in that bottom back behind me. So let's take a look at Bowling Cemetery. I'm going to show you all some of the views from up here, some of the stones, and then we'll take a closer look at the grave of my great-grandfather and great-grandmother as well, Dewey and Florence Salmons. There's a gravel road coming up to the cemetery here, and I'm going to try to point. It's right in there. You're not really going to be able to see it because of the fog. Let me try to get that back into view. You're not really going to be able to see it because of the fog, but right over in there's a little house there, but there's a silo, and over in there is where my grandfather was born. So we're going to take a little stroll around the cemetery. This started out as a family cemetery, and my grandfather actually showed me a place up here, 4 little markers, and he told me that he actually had the deed to some of this land up here, and that includes right over here where my great-grandparents are buried, which is right here. But this really, it started out as a family cemetery. Like I said, someone in the family donated some property to be used for this purpose, but really it has morphed into more of a community cemetery for the Hitchens area. I would say there's several up here that are not family. This is just kind of became a community cemetery, but I don't know how well this will translate on camera. But we are definitely on top of a hill, and you really can't see it, I don't think, as well on camera. That is a steep grade. So not only are there people buried on top of the hill, you've also got people buried on the side of the hill too. So, but that's so common here in Kentucky, Northeast Kentucky, and I guess if you would consider Appalachia in general, you will see that a lot. So I come up here every now and then. It's I check things out. I know when my grandfather was still alive, he would make sure that the grave of his parents was, you know, cleaned up, looked good and all that. So I like to come up here every now and then, make sure everything looks okay. But I've done videos, and the reason I said we're going to visit the grave of Dewey is because I've done videos on Florence before, but I got to thinking I've never really talked about Dewey that much. And I think maybe one reason, as you can see here, he died in 1954 when my grandfather was a young man, and Florence died in 88. I actually remember her. I have memories of her. Of course, the memories I have, she was already gripped by old age. But yeah, this is my origin story. My family, Dewey's family, comes back to this area of Florence. She was raised, from where I stand, probably about an hour away. But back in those days, to get from where she was raised to where we are today, I mean, that was an all-day's journey on a horse. So just here visiting the grave of Dewey and Florence Salmons. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Dewey and about his life, my great-grandfather.
Dewey Millard Salmons would be born May 11th, 1899 in Carter County, Kentucky, where we are today. He would grow up the way most did in those days, modest. And modest is just a nice way of saying poor. You had to work and work hard in those days. You had to farm and raise livestock and hope that this year's crop lasted through the winter. He would be married to a lady named Florence Adams. For the purpose of our video, we will call her Florence number 1. He would have kids with Florence and had settled into a life with her before her untimely death. He would then go on to marry who we will call Florence number 2, Florence Hay, my great-grandmother. She would also marry Dewey with kids of her own. Their firstborn together would be my grandfather, a total of 14 kids. The timeline of Dewey's life would intersect with both world wars. On his draft card for World War I, he was listed as a coal miner. And although Kentucky wasn't as much of a coal mining country as West Virginia, there were still coal mines here. Just think back to the song Coal Miner's Daughter by Loretta Lynn. She grew up an hour or so from here. By the time the Second World War broke out, his draft card would show him as a farmer. Those were two of the most common occupations around these parts. I don't know near as much about Dewey as I do some of my other ancestors, although I do remember a time when my grandfather had told me that his father, Dewey, was drinking some good old Kentucky Mountain Dew, and I don't mean the soft drink. When my grandmother Florence chastised him for partaking in front of the boys, he would reply, "I'm only doing this so they'll know what not to do." I can see where my grandfather's humor came from. Dewey lived a relatively short life. He was stricken with cancer and passed at the age of 55. When my grandfather was drafted into the Army for Korea, he was about to get shipped there for battle. His father Dewey passed right before his departure. He was told to stay here to tend to his family, and he never had to go to Korea. Although I never met Dewey Salmons, and there are very few still living today that do remember him, he's still part of me, and he's still part of my origin story.
And I know that these origin story videos are not for everyone, but I do like to share some of my life and what brought me to be with you all, because I mean, here's the thing, I've been with you all now almost 5 years. We've had this channel going, and you all are like my family. I mean, there's names I recognize, there's names that I look for in the comments, and I really appreciate that. I'm going to ask you to join me over on Facebook as well. If you search for Whittdocs on Facebook, we have a great community over there. That's the best way to get in contact with me. I'm very interactive on there. I'm going to start something new over on my Facebook page too, so I want you all to join me for that. And I'll have a place where you can actually order these. I'm going to start a Whittdocs postcard series. I've had a lot of people reach out to me on how they can support the channel and wanting to hear from me, wanting to get items that I offer. And we're going to try to expand that, but the first thing we're going to do is start offering Whittdocs postcards. I'm going to fill those out by hand, none of this computer generated stuff. I'm going to sign those for you, handwritten, get those sent out. My goal here is not to make money, it's to stay better connected with my community, so everything that I offer there is going to be cheap. So just basically enough to cover the charges, but I want to connect with you all, and people have been asking me to do something like this for years, and it just never worked out. So I thought postcards, kind of a personal touch, may be a way to do that. But I hope you are still enjoying the channel. Whittdocs, you can find me mostly on YouTube and Facebook. I do a little TikTok, not near as much over there, but YouTube, Facebook, join me. And please, if you've never subscribed to the channel, do that and come along with us. I always enjoy hearing from you. And we have a great community over on Facebook, so just join us there. Very interactive. I take polls, put behind the scenes pictures, all kinds of different stuff on there. So just join us. So once again, from Bowling Cemetery in Hitchens, Kentucky, I will see you again soon.